Okay, I took some time off camera to make sure this guy was finished painting. And we've got his little dots all done all around his hat and his bow tie. And I think he's looking pretty good. The other thing we want to do, two things. I want to antique it kind of, give it some little bit of flavor to it. And then we want to highlight it. And then we want to put some sealer on it. So the way we highlight and the way we make it look antique, we're going to dip into this buttermilk. Buttermilk is a good paint because it's going to allow me to do some highlights. So what I'm going to do is dip into the paint and then rub almost all that paint off my brush, but it also gets it in there. And then when I go over, it's going to pick up these highlights. So you can see how it's picking up the facets and showing very lightly. I don't want to be very heavy-handed. Showing very lightly what is going to be highlighted on this little guy. So the black areas will show up more of this highlight than any other area, but we can make it a little bit heavier in some parts. I'm going to do this all over his head and body, the hat and the bow tie, very lightly. Just got a real light touch on the paintbrush. You're not going to do much with it because you don't want these stark lines hanging out everywhere. We'll do it a little bit over the bow tie, not a whole lot. Okay, I'm gonna go get a little bit more. We'll dip that down in there, and all we're gonna do is get a little bit off of there, and do that hat too. See how it gets a little bit heavy? Got too much on there. We'll just very lightly go over that hat, highlight some of these high areas. Make them stand out a little bit more, gives another level of depth to it. Do that on the beak and do that on the feet. Okay. I noticed some area I need to clean up here real quick. His eyeball highlight disappeared. So I'm going to grab that white again. I'm going to use one of the styluses this time, real small one. Dip back into that white. I just want to add that little highlight right there on his eye. Okay. We'll hit the blow dryer just to make sure it's completely dry. All right, highlights are done, antiquing is done, and now what we're going to use next is this Joe Sonja. Joe Sonja matte varnish. When you put it on your carving, what this is going to do, this keeps the paint from fading. So you put this on there and wipe it off and let it dry, and then you can go over it with some kind of sealer, whether you a spray sealer or a brush sealer, but this is going to keep your paint from fading. So even if you handle it, whatever, it's not going to come off as long as you put some kind of sealer. I'm going to roll it between my fingers because I don't want to shake it up. I do want to shake it up, I just don't want to add bubbles. This doesn't add bubbles. And I don't need a whole lot. I need about half a well. So I'm only going to pour about half a well in there. I'm going to use that same brush. This brush is good for highlighting, and it's also good for adding the matte varnish paint sealer. Okay, and all I'm going to do is just put it on everywhere there's paint. Don't worry about as you brush on it, it bubbles up on your carving. That'll level itself out, and even if you put it on a little bit thicker, it's not a big deal. But you want to cover all the paint because this forms a sealer, a varnish as they say, between your carving and between anybody touching it, sun's rays, paint fading, things like that. It prevents that. So we'll just brush that all on. Now, depending on who's carving and who you're listening to, there is 1,000 different ways to finish, seal, antique, cover your carving. Everybody, it seems, has their own way. And even some of those will change. I know people who earlier in their carving career used one type, and now that they're more experienced, they use another. And you know, I don't know that there's one way, the best way. It's your way. You have to find what works for you. I have learned from some of the best on how to carve, and I've tried them. It seems like every type of sealing out there, I've learned every bit of them. And I use a variety of them. I don't have just one way of sealing, painting, finishing a carving. Sometimes I'll brush on a sealer. Sometimes I'll brush on an antique. I'll use Watco stain to make it look dark. I'll use natural Watco to seal it. I'll use a Carnauba / orange sealer to brush it on. I'll use Minwax spray can. I've used a lot of different ones, and I don't know that there's one particular way of making sure that your carving is perfectly done. It's going to be your way and your way only. No one can tell you how you should do that. So I'm going to take a couple of paper towels, and I'm just going to, now that I've got it all on there, just going to wipe off the excess. And a paper towel works better because those little paper fibers that it leaves are easy to take off. You do it with cloth, sometimes it has a tendency to get caught in the fibers of the wood and it leaves it there. And I like using the paper towels. They're easily thrown away, and as long as I'm not using an oil-based type of finish, I don't have to worry about disposing of the things. I can go ahead and do that. I'm done right here. What I want to do next is just hit it with a hairdryer again. Just want to dry that off. About a minute, even less, sometimes 15 seconds, depending on how much you got on there. I'm going to sit here and just gaze at him because I like the way he turned out. He's a pretty good little fella. Doesn't take that long. Obviously it takes a little bit longer when you're doing a video and talking about it and having a show about it. But I can do one of these in, a couple hours, and then another half hour to an hour for painting. Now ordinarily, if I was going to give this away or sell it, I would spray it with some kind of finish on the outside of it, and I'll actually go out in the garage and spray that. You know how to spray. If you don't know how, look it up on a video. There's a lot of videos on how to seal a carving or how to seal a piece of wood. You can use a brush-on sealer. You can use a spray-on sealer. I like a spray-on sealer, although it's very wasteful because a lot of it doesn't hit what you want. And if you get it too close to the wood while you're spraying it, then it has a tendency to be glossy, even though you're using matte or semi-gloss. I use either matte or semi-gloss on my carving so they don't get too glossy. I don't want them to look glossy, then they look plastic, and people say, I can buy that at Walmart for 20 bucks. And you're going, well, mine's 20 bucks and it's made by a carver, or 50 bucks or whatever price you charge. Anyway, I think this fella's done. One of the last things I'm going to do before I spray it is to sign it. I want to sign all my carvings. I want to make sure everybody knows who did that. So that way, if somebody wants one in the future, they can come back and they can see me. They can look me up on YouTube or look me up on the web or whatever, and I'll show up. But I want to make sure I sign my carvings. I don't number them because I don't want anybody to think theirs is number 300 instead of number 1. Plus, I don't want the IRS coming and saying, well, you sold 300 of them and this one's number 301. We want taxes on 300 of them. And, a lot of these things are given away, or they're put in a raffle, or they're donated, or they're presents. And so the fact that I put 301 on there doesn't mean I sold 301. It means I've made 301. So for anybody to come and want taxes on the sale of those things, it's just crazy. Anyway, we're going to seal this fella, and he'll be up for sale, and or back in the bin to be given away later at Christmas, or to gift somebody. So hope you've enjoyed this little ride. My next carving we're going to do, we'll have to see what that comes up, but I think my next one's going to be a letter opener, face letter opener. Got a face on the top of it. I've enjoyed this little ride. It's been a learning experience for me. It's my first set of videos, and we've had a lot of fun doing this. At least I have. I hope you have too. I hope you learned something, and I hope you give this little carving, this little project a whirl. And you'll find that a lot of people really enjoy it. So I look forward to talking to you on the next series of videos, and we'll see you at that time.